Collective Obligation is an exotic primary pulse rifle in Destiny 2. For the intrinsic perk, it is Void Leech. This weapon leeches void debuffs when damaging targets that are suppressed, weakened, or volatile. Once charged, press reload to swap firing mode. In this mode, damage from this weapon applies the same void debuffs that were leeched. When you damage an enemy with void debuffs, you will store the debuff that enemies had in your gun. While the perk says leeching, this term is 100% accurate since the enemy that has the debuff does not lose the debuff. It's more of a copying instead of leeching. When you aim down sight with this gun, you can see 3 small bubbles on the right side and 1 big bubble at bottom. From the top, small bubbles represent suppression, weakened, and volatile, while this big bubble states if your gun is fully charged or not. In this example, we have suppression debuff stored in the gun, but does not have weakened and volatile, and the gun is not fully charged. To leech the debuff, only 1 shot on an enemy with a debuff is required. However, to fully charge the gun, you need to land 9 shots in total on an enemy with a debuff. This does not need to happen on the same debuff. For instance, if you shoot 3 shots on an enemy with suppression, 3 shots on an enemy with weakened, and the last 3 on an enemy with volatile, the gun will be fully charged. Stowing the gun will not remove any charge status on the gun, so you can change your weapons freely. Once the gun is fully charged, you will get a buff to indicate that you're ready to activate the perk. You can still leech debuffs that you're missing from an enemy while in this state, so leech more debuffs if you can before activating the perk. Once you activate the perk, you will get 10 seconds to enjoy the perk. Whenever you damage an enemy while the perk is on, they will be debuffed with the same debuff that the gun had stored at the time of activation. You cannot leech new debuffs from an enemy while the perk is active. For instance, if you didn't have volatile debuff at the time of activation, shooting the enemy with volatile debuff while the perk is active will not leech volatile debuff to your gun. After 10 seconds, the gun will enter the leech cooldown state. While in this state, you cannot charge your gun to activate the perk, and when the cooldown is over, the gun will lose all types of debuff it has leeched, so everything needs to start from the beginning. Oddly enough, you can leech the new debuff that your gun didn't have during the cooldown, but it doesn't matter since you lose everything when the cooldown is over. Collective Obligation's exotic trait is Umbral Sustenance. This weapon's magazine is automatically reloaded when you gain Devour, a Void Overshield, or become invisible. If you get Devour, Void Overshield, or become invisible, basically void buffs, this gun automatically reloads. This can proc while the gun is stowed as well. It sounds simple enough, but I found some more points I believe is worth to talk about, so I will. For the Overshield, there are 2 conditions where the perk procs. 1. When you gain Overshield while you do not have it. You gain the buff named Void Overshield when you gain Void Overshield, so this is easy to check. 2. While you have Overshield, the perk will proc every 3 seconds. This will happen as long as you have the Overshield. Reload proccing is faster than the time needed to clean out the magazine, so while you have Overshield, you can fire continuously. For Ward of Dawn, you get Void Overshield if you have Helm of Saint 14 equipped, so you can use this to your advantage. Remember that to refresh Void Overshield with the bubble, you need to leave and re-enter the bubble. For Devour, every kill that extends your Devour timer counts as proccing the perk. In other words, every kill while Devour is on will reload this gun. And like Overshield, the perk will proc every 3 seconds while you have Devour on. For the invisibility, the perk procs when you go invisible. Yeah, that's pretty much about it. Collective Obligation is the example of a gun that is cool and unique, but not practical. On paper, this gun sounds amazing. Void debuffs are powerful, but there may be a short amount of time not being able to apply them due to the main source of void debuffs being abilities. Collective Obligation can be used to fill out that term to apply void debuffs. So what's the problem? Well, there are multiple. First of all, using this gun forces you to use a Void subclass. Collective Obligation revolves around Void subclass, and if you're not using Void, this gun practically has no exotic traits. Now, you can rely on your teammates to apply Void debuffs for you to leech, but it still requires a teammate using a Void subclass, and it doesn't work out if you're playing solo. Second, you need an enemy that can survive the Void debuff in the first place to leech it. If an enemy dies instantly at your suppression grenade, then you can't leech suppression. So you need to think about which abilities to use at which enemies if you're planning on using Collective Obligation and Full Potential. Third, you don't really need Void debuffs all the time. The amount you can get from Void abilities are fine most of the time. Every class has a means to apply all 3 debuffs, and if you really need a certain debuff at a specific time, you should first consider saving the ability until you need it instead of using exotic slot on Collective Obligation just for the debuff. Fourth, let's say that you managed to get all 3 debuffs stored in the gun. Now, it would be 10 seconds of unleashing the leaving hell to enemies, right? Not really. Sure, void debuffs are strong, but suppression is only worth in PvP. There are a lot of ways to apply weaken debuff on an enemy, plus void grenade with echo of undermining can apply very easily, and volatile is more of an add clear debuff, so it is fun to have, but not necessity in most cases. Is it good that collective obligation can bring uptime of those debuffs higher? Sure, but not really worth the effort and the usage of an exotic slot. Finally, which enemy really is the main target of this gun? Is it ad clears? It will do the job, but ads don't really need debuffs on them, so what this gun can do on ads can be done by any other guns. How about elite? It will deal with them better than normal pulse rifles, but it still is a pulse. This is a job for a special heavy weapon. How about applying weaken to bosses? Well, the uptime for the perk is only 10 seconds, and there are other guns specialized at applying debuffs to an enemy like Divinity or Tractor Cannon. Can Collective Obligation compete against other means of weakening for boss DPS? Not a chance. Normally, I try to talk about a good fact about a gun in this section, but after using this gun for some time, I was not able to find a good place to use this gun outside of because I want to. And even that, I had to do my best to use this gun, which caused more of a headache than fun. I believe that something can be done about this gun to make it more usable, but for now, it is safe to say that this gun is a lackluster. Thank you for watching. I will see you on my next video.